Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first of two identical regional multimodal freight plan update meetings. My name is Heather Hildebrandt. I'm with NCDOT. I'm the project manager for the update on the freight plan, and I'm so happy that you have joined us to not only hear about what we are doing, but also to provide your input. Just as a little housekeeping, first, if you're not speaking, please make sure that you keep yourself on mute and your video camera off. Additionally, we will be recording this, this presentation and sharing it, so just keep that in mind as well. And then finally, if there are any questions, we ask that you use either the question box or the chat. We'll be monitoring both of those as you move along. We will have interactive, I guess we've got the meeting rules right here. We will also have some interactive polling throughout the presentation, and there'll be instructions on that as we move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to our consultant team, HNTB, and John Burris. John, it's up to you.
Thank you, Heather. Just to provide a quick overview of the agenda today. So first, we'll talk about just the general approach of freight planning. We'll talk about the designation of the statewide freight network, followed by commodity flow reviews, freight modal profiles, and then we'll talk about the next steps of this process and just have discussion amongst all the attendees. And just to let you know, a more detailed survey will be sent out via email after this meeting. Next slide, please. So these are the meeting ground rules Heather just went over. Again, just keep your cameras off when you're not speaking, and then send the participants use the chat features is the main takeaway. Go to the next slide. Robin?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Robin Arthur with HNTB, and we will be doing some polling throughout the meeting to get some real-time results. And so we're using publicinput.com for that. You can either open another window on your browser or use your phone and type in publicinput.com/freight, or you can text freight to 984-205-6615 or scan the QR code that's on your screen. And either way, you can answer the questions that we'll be proposing throughout the meeting. We'll be doing different questions in different parts of the meeting, so while you might see the questions, you can wait until we talk about the specific things before you answer each question. So we'll be looking for some discussion afterward. So we have our first question that we want to go. It's kind of an icebreaker to get you guys used to using the publicinput.com. So we'd like to understand where everybody's coming from. So which region do you represent? And we have the questions right there, and you can type in you go to the website and type in the publicinput.com or /freight, or type in freight to the number or text freight to the number on the screen. So we'll give everybody just a moment to do that and see if we can get some results going and we can share those. Good, we've got about half the people have been able to respond to that question so far. Oh, we got 32. Good job. And I will just bounce over and share that results that we're getting here. So far, we've got about half the respondents showing up so far, but just to keep us moving here, looks like we've got about 36 from the Eastern, 24 from Central North Carolina, 18 from Western, 12 from statewide, and then 9 from a neighboring state. So that's great. So back to our second question is kind of which sector do you represent? And those are listed there, and some of you have kind of worked ahead on responding to that question, and we appreciate that. So for those of you, you can keep responding to that question too. And so we see, if y'all can see the screen there, we've got a good highway representation with about 47%. Other is about 30%. So we've, and in those questions, you all can type in the chat on what the other is, and we've got some agriculture and ports and rail represented. So it looks like some good representation from the different modes as well. Thank you all for doing that, and then we'll get to some other questions throughout the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to John to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Robin. So we'd just like to start by giving everyone just a brief overview of the freight planning process. As you see here, we have freight planning in the green funnel type thing, and then we have the different steps where it's vision, goals, and objectives, and then you talk about, in general, your freight system inventory and assessments. You analyze commodity flow. You have a multimodal needs assessment standpoint. You look at prioritizing projects and then also implementing the strategies. And if you see the blue arrow that goes down through there, statewide outreach and engagement is needed throughout this process. And it's a very important step of this, so that's why I'm glad there's a good number of attendees here so we can get your input. Today's discussion will focus mainly on the freight system inventory and assessment, as well as the commodity flow analysis. You go to the next slide. So this next slide, we're going to talk about the North Carolina Highway Freight Network. So this, the original statewide freight plan was done in 2017, and a lot of work was done analyzing these roadways and determining what roads should be in the initial highway priority network for freight. What we have here is you see the blue lines, the pink lines, and the green lines are all in that network. Decent coverage throughout the state. There are some areas, all interstates are on there, most U.S. highways are on there, ADT, truck volumes, all these things were taken into account when this was developed. So take a quick look at this, and then we're going to go to the next question, and we'll come back to this map. So think about, are there any additions you would make to the North Carolina Highway Freight Network? And probably you don't mind going back to the back on the slide and showing the map.
Yeah, think about what additions you'd want to make to the map. And then Tiana, can you also type in the chat the phone number for the text message in the, so it's publicinput.com/freight, and then you can text freight to the phone number. And if Tiana, you could type in that into the chat, that would be helpful. Thank you. And we're seeing a couple of responses there to that question, better access to the interstate, rail to WNC, and participation. So those are the three comments we've gotten so far. US 421. North Carolina 42 between New Bern and Greenville. US 1 south of Sanford to US 74, US 321 to Boone. All of the completed segments of I-295 around Fayetteville. New I-885 to Durham, and new 540 Southern Outer Loop in Wake County. Intermodal sites, and I can show them on the screen. I was just reading them as they came in. Better access to the interstate. North Carolina 27 between Charlotte Albemarle, intermodal site locations. Any of those you want to discuss, John?
So for the US 421, are you talking about from I-95 down to Wilmington? 'Cause I think the majority of it throughout the rest of the state is covered. And you can just respond in the chat if you'd like. And a lot of these new location ones people have on here, yes, like 295 was completed since the last time, and NC 540 is under construction. And this was just, these are all done in 2017, so some of this will be updated.
Very good. Thanks very much. That's helpful for us.
All right. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kip Strauss to talk about commodity overflow.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me go through and talk about all the goods that are moved throughout North Carolina. So on this first slide, when we look at the total freight moved in North Carolina, we see that in 2022, an estimated 747 million tons of commodities were moved, equaling, $1.1 trillion. Projecting out to 2050, we estimate that 1.14 billion tons of freight were moved at a value of $1.86 trillion. So this represents a 53% growth by weight and 84% growth by value. The 2017 freight plan indicated there were 594 million tons of freight moved at a value of $1 trillion in 2012. So you can see the growth since the last plan. And then it was great to see so many people representing the highway network when we did the attendance. And so you can also see from this graphic that trucks make up the largest mode of travel in the freight network. And all of this information comes from the Freight Analysis Framework, which is a US DOT database that is developed and projections determined. So if we go on to the next slide. So first looking, we're going to look at the top commodities that are moved throughout North Carolina. So first looking at the graph on the left, in 2017 and 2050, the largest commodities transported by weight are gravel, non-metal products, and wood products. Then looking at the graph on the right, in 2017 and 2050, the largest commodities transported by value are mixed freight, pharmaceuticals, and machinery. Compared to the previous plan, coal and gravel were in the top ranks by weight. And also mixed freight and pharmaceuticals and machinery by value, and electronics by value were the top ranks. So there's a lot of similarities from the previous plan to this plan with the types of commodities that are being moved. Next slide. Now let's take a look at the commodities by directional flow. When we look at the directional flow by weight, in the pie chart on the left, we see that the majority of the commodities were moved in-state, representing 44% of all the commodities. Looking at the previous plan, in-state also made up the largest share, but only at 34%. So there's been a 10% increase in in-state movement of goods. When we look at the commodity directional flow by value in the pie chart on the right, we see that the through volume is expected to be the largest directional flow. Looking at the previous plan, through traffic was also the largest proportion of goods moved at 39%. So that dropped a little bit from the previous plan. The next slide. So now I want to show you North Carolina's domestic trading partners by weight. So you can see North Carolina highlighted in white, and so we're comparing who are the trading partners with North Carolina. And you can see we've estimated 84% of the trading is east of the Mississippi River with all of the highlighted states. But then California and Texas make up a large portion of the trading partners west of the Mississippi. California, we trade natural sands, and with Texas, the primary commodities by tonnage traded, machinery with California and natural sands with Texas. So now let's take a look at the same thing, but trading partners by value. And so a similar story east of the Mississippi, the vast majority of the trading at 78%. You can see that with all the shaded states. And again, electronics is the primary commodity by value traded with both California and Texas. So that gives us a good understanding of who the trading partners are with the commodities that I went over before. Next slide. So
right,
we want to get some feedback. Go ahead, Robin.
Oh, no, I was just going to just say we want to get your feedback on the commodity flow. So this is another input question, and just type in your responses here to whether you're confident or not very confident in the information that Kip just presented on the commodity flow.
And again, this information comes from that freight analysis framework database, if any of you have worked with that. But, you know, we just want to get a sense from you if those numbers feel right, if your intuition is saying that those numbers that I presented seem reasonable to you. And then if they don't, the next question is, we'd like some feedback from you on if they don't feel reasonable, why?
And so here, about half the folks feel like they're somewhat confident in the results, and then about 19% are neither confident nor unconfident. 10% are very confident. So there we go. And we've got about 21 respondents so far on that one. So thank you all. And so yes, and the next question was, if you are low in confidence, why? And if you could type in your reasons why. And maybe you just type those into the chat so that we can ask some follow-up questions on that one, because I don't think that's actually in the survey. But we didn't have a lot of folks that didn't think that weren't very unconfident or not very confident in this, so that's good.
Anything coming up in the chat?
No, we don't have anything in the chat or the questions box related to this.
Okay. Why don't we go on, Robin?
All right, and let's go back to are we on screen 3? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
So now we just want to talk a little bit about the economic role of freight. And so this slide shows you what that economic role plays with freight in North Carolina economy. You can see that the average employment in 2019 for the freight modes totals nearly 165,000 employees, representing more than 8,000 establishments. So on average, this represents 69.3 tons of freight moved per North Carolinian and 25,560 tons per business establishment. So in summary, freight plays a very important role in the North Carolina economy. Next slide. I think turning it over to John now.
Thank you. So this section I'm going to talk about highway traffic and truck traffic. You see in front of you, here's a map of 2019 average annual daily truck traffic. We chose 2019 just because the 2020, the numbers are a little off with the pandemic, so this is the year we want to look at the most recent normal track data. So as you see, the green boxes are the 3 highest truck volumes in the state of North Carolina. They're all in the I-85 corridor. The highest is outside of Charlotte on just northeast of the 485 loop. It's almost 17,000 trucks. And the second highest just west of that on I-85, just west of the 485 loop at nearly 16,000 trucks. And then between Greensboro and Raleigh on I-40, I-85 combination is 13,000. If you look throughout the area, you'll see I-77 has over 10,000 trucks. I-95 gets in the 8,000 range. Some other interesting ones. There's only, when you think about the mountains and I-40 going through, you think about a lot of trucks, but there's only 4,000 trucks a day going through there. And when you look over, for instance, on I-40 on the east side towards Wilmington, there's 2,500 trucks a day just north of Wilmington, but there's nearly 5,000 trucks on US 74 west of the port, as well as 4,400 on US 17 towards Camp Lejeune. Just some interesting trends to go out there. And if you just go on to the next slide, please. So these 2 charts talking about pavement conditions and bridge conditions. So we'll start out with the pavement conditions. These are rated either good or not good based from DOT, and we have a slide after this that will explain it in further detail. But as you can see, interstates and state routes are all over 60% rated as good, as well as U.S. highways and North Carolina highways. They're in the upper 50s. So approximately 60% of all highway conditions in North Carolina are rated good. And to the right, you can see bridge conditions. So the green is not structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. The orange is functionally obsolete. The yellow is structurally deficient, and then the blue is both of those. So just to give you a definition, so when a bridge is considered structurally deficient, it has been restricted to light vehicles, it's closed to traffic, or it requires rehabilitation. A functionally obsolete bridge does not have the lane width, shoulder width, or vertical clearance needed to serve the traffic demand that it has. And also, sometimes it can't handle occasional flooding. That's also classified as a functionally obsolete bridge. So if you go to the next slide. So this is just a map of, we showed you the chart the previous slide. This is the map showing where these pavement conditions are. So North Carolina rates these. They use things such as pavement type, pavement age, rehab year, and other factors to look at to score the pavement conditions. See, it's either rated good, fair, or poor. There's a lot of green throughout the state. A lot of the interstate corridors are green. And there are some areas like around the Rocky Mountain area. There's on US 64, 95, there's some red in there. There's some red towards the mountains. There's some red on US 74, just east of I-26. A lot of these areas, I will say, also are being currently being addressed with projects that are ongoing. This is 2019 conditions, so that is the last inventory the NCDOT has done with this that is public. You go to the next slide. This is also just talking about paving conditions and the highway freight network versus all DOT roads. So 72% of all the freight network is rated as good, whereas when you look at all DOT roads, it's only 66%. 16% is fair on the freight network, 22% is fair on the all the roads, and it's 12% on both is rated for poor. This does show that although, well, one thing, NCDOT has the second most state-maintained roads in all of the nation except for Texas. And although resources are always limited, it shows that DOT does put a focus on high-traffic roads, in which are also involved in the freight network. Next slide. So we talked about bridge conditions previously. We showed them in a chart. We'll show you on a map what it is. So there's 22,200 bridges in North Carolina, approximately. 6% of those bridges are structurally deficient, and 3% of bridges on the highway freight network are structurally deficient. And there's nearly 8,000 bridges on the highway freight network. So what you see on the map is just ones related to the highway freight network. There's some clusters in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area, a little bit in the Raleigh area, and then a lot on I-40 towards the western part of the state, as well as US 74 and US 23, as well as in the Asheville area. I know there's projects as well addressing some of these. I-26 is being upgraded. The I-240 in Asheville is being replaced. So there are projects that will definitely address these and help this situation. If you go to the next slide. This is functionally obsolete bridges. So 18% of North Carolina bridges are functionally obsolete. 16% of those bridges, 16% of the freight network bridges are functionally obsolete. There's a lot along the interstate corridor, especially the older corridors, I-95, but you see a lot of that is being currently upgraded with the project. I know I-40, basically from I-77 through the mountains, has quite a few, as well as I-26, which is under a current project right now. If you go to the next slide. Then these are the bridges that are both functionally obsolete and structurally deficient. So that's only 3% statewide, but it's 2%, only 2% of all bridges on the highway freight network classifies both. Again, it's really the same areas, some urban areas through there, as well as the I-40 corridor, and just around some areas in the mountains. Go to the next slide. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and look at highway network performance. This is 2019, and this is average truck speeds. So this is a statewide. The next slide, we're going to look at more zoomed into some metro areas, but there's quite a bit of, this is for the AM peak hour. There's quite a bit of green on interstates and other facilities in your rural areas. You'll see that the mountains, it slows down some, which you would expect with the terrain. If you go to the next slide, we zoom into the metro areas. You'll see again that same general trend. So for instance, in Greensboro, in downtown Greensboro, trucks really slow down. Some of that's due to posted speed limits. Some of it's just due to congestion. Same thing happens in the Charlotte area. Anything inside 485, except for I-85, slows down considerably. And the Raleigh area, the Raleigh-Durham area is the same story. So if we go to the next slide. This is the same information just for the PM time frame. It's very similar to the AM from a statewide standpoint. There is more, which we'll see when we go to the next slide, there is more congestion in the metropolitan areas. The Boone area does not perform well in the PM area for this, as well as the coast, US 17 up and down basically from Wilmington to Camp Lejeune. If you go to the next slide, see there is similar patterns. Greensboro stays about the same. It's the AM. Charlotte, there's a little more congestion and lower speeds, but Raleigh is where you see the biggest difference. US 70, I-40, US 1, all those have considerably lower speeds in the PM than the AM. All right, if you go to the next slide. We're going to switch gears a little again, talk about truck crashes. So we were going to show this just on the corridor, but we decided that let's just show all the crashes across the state for a little bit. And you can see they're primarily on the metro areas and the interstate corridors. And there's over 46,000 truck crashes since from 2015 to 2019. Seems like a lot. From the original plan, which was 2011 to 2015, there were over 49,000 truck crashes. So there has been a 5% reduction in truck crashes since that time. You go to the next slide. This just breaks down the what facilities the truck crashes occur on. A third of it's on interstates, but interestingly, the next highest level is local streets. And then he goes to U.S. routes, North Carolina routes, some state routes, and then some unknown and public areas. The unknown is usually the parking lot. It's interesting that the interstates are the highest, and the second highest is the local streets, and that's usually your last mile, first and last mile going to and from your warehouses. If you go to the next slide. This is also looking at the crashes by severity and type. The vast majority of trucks are luckily only property damage only. There were about 1% of truck crashes that involve fatality. With the accident reports, you can't tell who was involved, who the fatality involved. It was the truck or the person that the driver of the truck was in an accident with, but still 1% is 1% too many. And on the right, you see the by type, and there is the leading is sideswipe, followed by rear end crashes, and then trucks that ran off the road in angles. So they ran off the road. It's interesting. When you look at it, a lot of those do happen at night. So if that's fatigue, if that's lack of truck parking, you don't get the accident reports, but just something you want to dig into these a little bit further and see what's going on. And then the next slide. This is just looking at truck crashes by 100 miles of roadway. So obviously the most happens in your metro areas, but when you break it down to the actual truck crashes by your roadway miles, the three highest counties are Catawba, Graham, and Hertford. Then when you look at the lowest truck crash, you have Yankton, Wake, and Yancey. Now the Wake County is surprising to me because when you looked on the overall map, there were quite a few truck crashes, but that's not the case when you look at it by roadway mileage. You see Brunswick County with the port is in the higher category, as well as all the coast, Dare, Hyde, and Camden. Most of the coastal counties are higher, as well as the mountain areas. So, now the surprising one is, despite the roadway network, Mecklenburg County still has a very high truck crash rate per 100 miles. So if you go to the next slide, Robin, I'll turn this over to you.
So please select your top 3 freight highway challenges in North Carolina. And we've listed several of them here: congestion, reliability, safety, asset preservation, first and last mile connections, rural connectivity, freight network design, and truck parking. And there's a little description next to them, so please just fill out your responses there, and we'll look at results here in just a moment. And I see some of you have worked ahead, and that's great. So, but if you want to change your mind, you can do that, I think. So we'll give you just a minute or so. But we're getting some good responses coming in. So based on the responses that we've gotten so far, it looks like congestion, safety, and first and last mile are the top 3, as well as rural connectivity is tied there. And that's probably not surprising to most of you. We'll see if we have any updates real quick on that, if that changed it at all. And still about the same there. So those are, that makes sense. Thank you all. We'll go back to the presentation, and Kip will talk about truck parking.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about truck parking. It's mostly what was done in the previous freight plan, because we're just getting started on updating the truck parking plan in this new freight plan. But I did see that 23% of the people identified truck parking as an important issue. So I would invite everyone, anyone who's interested in being part of a more detailed truck parking discussion, to put their name in the chat, and we'll add you to the list. But probably over the next few weeks, we're going to convene a group of people to dive a little deeper into the truck parking issues, and we'd love to have you as part of that group. So just add your name to the chat, and we'll make sure that we add you to the invitation. But the truck parking update, you know, we'll have that stakeholder outreach component, but we're looking at, you know, what has changed in the last 5 years as far as parking supply, parking demand, and our facility analysis. So if you go on to the next slide, Robin. So in 2017, North Carolina had 167 parking locations representing nearly 4,800 parking spaces. Approximately 59% of the parking locations are private and 41% are public. However, that's the locations. About 85% of the actual truck parking spaces are at privately run locations. Truck parking utilization indicates that parking facilities along I-26, I-77, I-85, and most of the I-95 corridor are at capacity. Truck demand is projected to increase as freight volumes are forecasted to grow by more than 43% by 2040, is what was represented in the previous plan. If we look at the next slide, we can see that truck parking facilities by type. We see that they're broken out by private facility, public rest areas, Walmart stores, and way stations. In 2017, the most facilities by type are private facilities, representing 44% of the facilities, and then public rest areas with 30% of the facilities. And then on the next slide, there was an update of the truck parking inventory in 2020. And when the update was done, we had found that there were 14 new parking locations added, which added 1,300 new parking spaces to the state. A lot of those were Pilot, Flying J added the most capacity in the state with 9 locations, followed by Love's with 4 new locations, and TA Greensboro with 1 new location. Next slide, and I'll turn it over to you, Robin.
All right, we've got a couple of survey questions on the new truck parking locations. So if you know of any new truck parking locations that have come online since 2017 or 2020, please let us know. And then if you know where they're located, let us know that as well. So that's the question 6 and 7. And then the next question is, what and where are truck parking needs and challenges? So we've got 2 questions there related to truck parking that you can respond to. So new locations and where are they? And then what are the needs and challenges of truck parking?
And again, if anyone can help us out with a deeper dive into truck parking, just add your name to the chat and we'll include you in the invitation that we're putting together for a discussion in a few weeks.
And we're seeing some responses of a couple new locations. Walmart in the foothills, there are about 5 to 9 trucks there every day, and Rocky Mount. So those are and so let's see. So what we see is US 74 from outside Shelby to Columbus needs a rest area and a gas station. So those are good responses, and so a few people do know have some information regarding the new truck locations and where there are needs as well.
Yeah, thank you for that input.
Also, there are, in the chat, we got that Uptime Truck Parking has added some locations for truck parking in and around Charlotte.
Oh, great. All right, I think we're ready to move on to rail.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And now that you're rested from talking about truck parking, we can stretch you out and talk a little bit about North Carolina's rail network. The next couple slides will provide a brief overview of the extensive rail network in North Carolina, and I just wanted to just show you the map here for the rail. So going to the next slide here. This map shows, the two Class 1 providers in North Carolina. The CSX is shown in blue, and Norfolk Southern rail line is shown in the lighter green color. And these two Class 1 rail lines make up nearly 70% of the total rail network in the state. The state as a total has about 3,200 miles of railway across the state. Also, you see on the map in red the North Carolina Railroad Company, which extends from Charlotte to Morehead City. And also, North Carolina has 26 short line railroads across the state. And an interesting fact, 86 of the 100 counties in North Carolina have active railway service. So about over 86% of the state has active rail service that can be maybe better utilized or accessed for intermodal rail opportunities or bulk rail opportunities. So the state also has some Class 1 intermodal terminals. There's the Norfolk Southern Charlotte Intermodal Terminal. There's the CSX Charlotte Intermodal Terminal, the Norfolk Southern Greensboro Intermodal Terminal, up to the middle of the state there, the north middle, and then the newer facility in Rocky Mount to the northeastern side of the state, the CCX terminal built in 2021. And that was kind of a public-private partnership between North Carolina DOT and CSX to help expand the intermodal capabilities on the I-95 corridor. Next slide, please. So just it's in draft, but getting close near completion is the comprehensive statewide rail plan. And this plan, we wanted to just provide just some of the key goals and objectives to you here that we're kind of considering as we go through this profile and we consider the freight elements for the freight plan here. And it looks at providing access to freight rail users, improving the rail safety throughout the state, enhancing the resiliency of the rail infrastructure, which is very important, making sure that you have multiple opportunities to utilize different corridors based on, storms and other issues. And then corridor level approach that can benefit the entire network. And also, realizing the economic opportunities of supporting the existing and potential rail-served markets. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just kind of give a real brief overview of some of the existing intermodal terminals in the state. The CCX terminal is a 330-acre site that will allow North Carolina ports to start the Wilmington Midwest Express by connecting the Port of Wilmington's customers with a daily freight rail service to the Midwestern U.S. It is estimated that CCX will eliminate 16 million truck miles each year. So you can see the importance, the environmental impacts it can have with the amount of emissions it can reduce and wear and tear on the highway network. The facility's location is convenient, only 5 miles off I-95, 60 miles northeast of Raleigh, and gets you to those major consumption markets that are referred to as the Triangle region. The site has 3 fully automated cranes with lift capacity of 110,000 containers per year, and they are all zero emission and fully automated. So that it's again, even the cranes provide that environmental service. The facilities provide CSX with automated gate systems that also help accelerate the pace of getting customers into and out of the facility, and also helps reduce the dwell time of trucks having to wait, and another way to reduce emissions. And then also it helps the truck drivers themselves pre-plan their arrival and picking their loads. Next slide, please. So also taking a look at the Greensboro Terminal. It's a 50-acre site. The facility is operated by Norfolk Southern. The terminal is a 24-hour available service. It is located near I-85, and in fact the container yard is just adjacent to the ramp. And the terminal boasts a neutral chassis pool on site, so that you can get your chassis and your container quickly for the drivers there. And they have top and bottom lift capabilities with their equipment on site. So next slide, please. Wanted to just kind of look a little bit into the into some of the goals of the rail plan and the freight rail users that what remains a priority for them, and improve the road and rail connections at freight rail facilities in port terminals is one of them. Intermodal terminals and transload facilities have made it possible for more cargo to be moved with greater efficiency from the freight generators and intermodal hubs like your port facilities, both on the waterways and inland. They provide that intermodal terminal access improvements, and to look at better utilization of the short lines in conjunction with your Class 1 railroads. And then the next one is to expand and improve on dock services for the railroads. In 2017, the Port of Wilmington commenced the Queen City Express, and we'll talk about that when we get to the rail section a little bit more. But in this offering intermodal rail service to Charlotte via CSX. And another freight rail investment program is the Piedmont Atlantic Intermodal Rail Safety, or they call it PAIRS program, and it improves safety and intermodal access to North Carolina's ports. Next slide, please. So along that safety talking point, it's important to see the trend here. So we went all the way back to the beginning of the last freight plan's coverage of rail safety, brought it forward to 2021. So you can see that there's in the graph there, overall injuries and safety has been declining since 2015 to now. So there's been a really good record of declining injuries in the rail network statewide. The fatalities stayed pretty consistent, but is also on a downward trend since 2018, and we're hoping that will, with additional focus, will continue to stay at a low rate in the state. And then overall accidents is also kind of lowered since 2018 as well. So the lowest point in 2016 is about where we're at again here in 2021. And then also looking at additional warning devices, rehabilitation, adoption of channelization are some of the things that the plan stated could continue to help this trend of a lower mortality rate and a good safety record within the rail network. Next slide, please. So looking at the, again, looking at in more detail about some of the rail programs throughout the state, the focus on the resiliency of rail infrastructure, providing the reestablishment of the S-line, which expands capacity for industries, produced in that triangle area that we described briefly, providing more redundant corridors like CSX's A-line to help reduce freight delays and overall congestion. And the other major area of resiliency is to continue to focus on the importance that North Carolina has on its military readiness, and the rail is a key component of that with the STRACnet system that serves military facilities and installations. This has to remain a top readiness to serve our nation's defense operations. So the railroad is a key component of that modal network. And then considerations within the STI prioritization process, it remains one of the high priorities within that plan. And then looking at a corridor level approach. So, complementary to the highway improvements, providing operational alternatives, getting trucks off the highway and getting them onto rail, finding ways to do that, you saw that multimodal forecast at the beginning that Kip did. Getting some of those trucks onto intermodal opportunities and intermodal moves is a good opportunity for providing capacity and reducing wear and tear and carbon emissions. And then looking at advancing the Southeast Corridor, aligning the major cities on the East Coast and the high performance rail services that are necessary and needed to serve major moves along that corridor, both north and south and in and out of other states as well. Next slide, please. So what are the economic opportunities that rail provides to North Carolina? So the rail system here is has many mega sites and rail served sites that provide access to manufacturing industries, which North Carolina is a huge manufacturing state, and it provides opportunities for businesses and local and regional infrastructure while encouraging economic development and growth. Currently 7 certified mega sites in North Carolina along the eastern and central portion of the state. So the GTP is Multimodal Industry Complex that serves a strategic hub for manufacturing and logistics services and improves the plans included on-site rail facilities, advancement of concepts for secondary rail connections and within to serve the GTP. So looking at other things like acquiring and preserving underutilized freight rail corridors. I mean, you saw the growth in highway earlier. It is important to not forget about the need to do that in other modes and to preserve those corridors for Class 1 investment, for state investment is a critical need going forward, we believe, in the freight plan. And then short line investment. Those short lines are becoming more and more critical. We're seeing that throughout the country where the short lines are getting those shorter distant pulls off of the main lines to your modal hubs, to your inland ports, and to your manufacturing areas. So that gets us to one of our survey questions for rail. And Robin, do you want to go ahead and take that?
Yeah, which of the following needs or challenges are most important to you for rail? So availability of direct rail service, cost of the railroad service, infrastructure needs, intermodal bulk and container transfer facilities, multimodal public and private partnerships, or other. And so just please provide your response to us and we can kind of look at those. We've already got some in there, which is great. I appreciate you all taking the time to respond to these questions. It's very helpful for us to have your feedback and get them. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat and let us know what those are around rail or any of the topic areas. We're happy to have that discussion and want to be able to address your questions or comments.
And Robin, while they're answering, they may have noticed there was not as much data on tonnage and intermodal moves by rail, and we will be providing that. That analysis is forthcoming, and we're kind of waiting on some of the final analysis and some of the other statewide plans to make sure that we align everything well. So that analysis will be, you'll see that in some of the future outputs and information.
All right, and what we're seeing here, it looks like infrastructure needs are at 33% in terms of priority, multimodal public and private partnerships, and availability of direct rail service, all are above 20%. So those are the top three so far. And other needs are at great intersections. So I appreciate that. So feel free to keep responding if you want to. It's helpful to us to get those responses in after this is over. And now we're going to move on to air cargo. And Tiana from HNTV is going to present.
Before we start air cargo, we do have one rail question that came in the chat. And that question is, how do the rail crossing injuries and crashes look on exposure base? Are there mode or less trains running over this period?
Did she say during COVID? I couldn't. I didn't. I missed a little bit of the question there. During
I'll read
COVID?
it again. No, it didn't say during COVID.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It just says, how do the rail crossing injuries and crashes look on an exposure base? Are there more or less trains running over this period?
And that's a good question, and I think we'll know more about that as we do our further analysis with the waybill data in conjunction with the FAP data. You know, if we could just take down the person's name that asked that question as we get into the more detailed analyses, we'll definitely respond directly and then make sure that's incorporated into the profile.
Thanks, Nastasha. Are there any other questions in the chat?
That's all.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll move on to the air cargo and to Tiana from HNTV. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. So we're going to take a look at air cargo in the state. So this is a map showing the 17 airports that transport air cargo to, from, and through North Carolina. And the three major airports in the state that handle air cargo are Charlotte-Douglas, Raleigh-Durham, and Piedmont Triad. And combined, these three airports move around 99% of air cargo in the state. And air cargo is a little under 1% of North Carolina's total freight movement. Next slide. So air cargo trends are important to analyze to see what the future of air cargo and air cargo demand is expected to be. Both these charts utilize FAF5 data, and the chart on the left shows the value and tonnage of air cargo moved in 2017 and the projections for the low and high growth scenarios for 2050. This shows air cargo about doubling from 2017 to 2050 by both value and tonnage. And compared to the previous rate plan in 2017, this lines up as in that plan it was projected out to 2045. And from that 2045 number to 2050, it's also expected to increase in this plan. And the graph on the right breaks this down a little further and shows the inbound, outbound, and combined inbound and outbound projections for 2017 and 2050, again in those low and high growth scenarios. And this also follows the same trends as the previous plan, showing tons roughly doubling. Next slide. So looking at the entire state, these are the top commodities transported by air in terms of tonnage and value in 2017, again from the FAF5 data. And pharmaceuticals shows up in the top 5 of commodities by both tonnage and value. And this lines up since North Carolina is a major pharmaceutical company hub. Machinery, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and plastic/rubber were in the top 5 of both commodity by tonnage and value. And next slide. So to understand where these commodities are traveling to and from, we took a look at the top trade partners. So the top 10 trade partners includes 7 domestic destinations and 3 international. So for the domestic destinations, Memphis carried 30% of tonnage for imports and exports and is a FedEx hub. Louisville consists of 13% of import and export tonnage and is a UPS hub. FedEx and UPS are located at 3 major airports, and they're also the top 2 air cargo carriers in North Carolina, and they carry 71% of the total air cargo in the state. And these numbers also, again, line up with the previous plan. So the 3 international airports are London, Munich, and Frankfurt in the top 10. There could be more international destinations, but these are just in the top 10. So these cargo shipments could be belly cargo, which would line up with the lower percentages of tons that go to and from these international destinations. Next slide.
All right, next survey question. Which of the following air cargo needs or challenges are most important to you? Similar to the rail, is it is it availability of air cargo service, cost of air cargo service, timeliness, improving air cargo infrastructure, adding more air cargo capacity, multimodal connectivity between the airport and rail, ports or highways, or other? So think about that for a moment and please provide some responses. Thank you. So it looks like we're seeing some multimodal connectivity is high on people's lists of needs or challenges with the cost of air cargo service and availability of air cargo service. So the connectivity, I think, is important here to note. See if that changed it a bit. All right. Still very high though. And improving infrastructure has that's important as well. All right, thank you all for that. We will move on to the next section. And now we're going to be talking about ports. So Jimmy's back to give us some information on North Carolina ports.
Thank you, Robin. So for those of you that aren't aware, North Carolina has a state port authority referred to as the North Carolina State Port Authority, or sometimes referred to as NC ports. And North Carolina's freight plan will provide a ports profile, just like you've heard of some of these others, that will provide a more detailed overview of the statewide waterborne and inland port system in North Carolina. Next slide, please. You'll see, stay here. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. Stay on the map. Yeah, so you'll see in the map here, we've kind of just did a brief overview of the main statewide facilities, and this doesn't include some private terminals that we'll describe briefly in the profile. But you see the port facilities on the screen. You have the Port of Wilmington, Port of Morehead City, and those are kind of shown in the blue icons along the M95 Marine Highway, which is a Maritime Administration designation. And then you have the Charlotte Inland Port, and then you see in orange the statewide rail network and kind of the connectivity there. In this map, we don't show the highway network, but in the profile, you'll see that that bit of connectivity as well. And then the three major freight airports that were just previously described, kind of their location on the map there. And then, as I said before, there are a few other private terminals, but we're not going to talk about those today. We're focusing on the state ports. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So you see here the core values, and the Port Authority in 2021 just updated their strategic plan, their core values and pillars. And so I just wanted to describe this to you so you're aware of how they're focusing on safety, people, integrity, and service, and that their core pillars are to grow their cargo volumes, which is important since they operate as a business in a sense, to expand their global coverage of vessel services, and you see that with a lot of their investments, to engage and support statewide economic development projects, and to develop the talent pipeline, so the workforce is real important. Next slide. So the key advantages of the Port of Wilmington is that the port terminal provides container, bulk, and break bulk movements. It is a 284-acre facility. It has a navigation channel that is at 42 feet deep, and with tides can even be 4 feet deeper than that when the tide is at full tide. Accommodating what we call post-Panamax vessels, or 1,200 foot plus length overall vessels, and 158 feet wide. That's beams, the width of the vessel. They are looking at a channel deepening to 47 feet, which pretty much allow them to bring in any of the major vessels in the world today. They have a recently improved air draft clearance, which that means the distance from the highest tidal or highest water level to the lowest obstruction along their channel. So they raised that recently to 212 feet, which is really important for getting these larger vessels in. And then on their terminal, they have over 1 million square feet of covered storage, 125 acres of open storage, 7 container cranes, and these are, you can kind of see them in the picture there. These are massive intermodal cranes that ship to shore cranes that take the containers off of those ships, and they have some of the top ones in the East Coast. And then they have 760 reefer plugs, and reefer means that they are plugged in for cold cold supply chain products like food and kindred products. And then on-dock rail and intermodal service, and they have access to CSX. And can we go to the next slide, please? And they're by the way, they're an employee-operated terminal at that terminal. The Port of Morehead City is a port terminal that provides bulk, break bulk, and ro-ro services. They have a 120-acre facility that you see in the picture there in the middle, and then up to the top left-hand corner there is another 150 acres that they have called Radio Island Terminal, that they are planning for some major development for expanded business. They have a navigation channel that's 45 feet deep. They have 9 berths with over 5,300 linear feet of bulkhead and wharf frontage. They also have over 1 million square feet of storage space. They have rail service from Norfolk Southern, on-dock rail, which is important for a lot of these bulk transfers. They have Class 1 rail service to the port, and then also 700 miles of more than 70% of the industry. They're within 700 miles of 70% of the East Coast of the United States industrial base, so it's very strategically located facilities, both of these on the east coast of the United States. So next slide, please. And then the other facility under the Port Authority is the Charlotte Inland Port, and its key characteristics include 20 acres of terminal space. They can accommodate over 2,000 grounded wheeled containers. They serve as a staging area for empty and loaded. They provide 24/7 access, and they serve the I-85 and I-77 corridors with this facility, and they also have on-site maintenance and repair for container and chassis and what have you, with an on-site shop there. And they also provide a shortening of the first and last mile for truck drivers, so that they get it there rapidly, so the truck drivers don't have to drive as far along the state highway system. Next slide, please. This is just a brief overview of the Queen City Express, which provides a rapid intermodal rail connection to Charlotte from the Port of Wilmington. Some of the advantages to it is it lowers the transportation costs. It provides the shortest direct rail service connection to the greater Charlotte region. It again shortens that first and last mile and reduces emissions, because they can put so many containers on a train, take off 200 trucks sometimes off the road. There's no dwell time at the port. They can load the train and go, and it also provides flexible staging and easy access to the CIP terminal that we described. Next slide, please. The Wilmington Midwest Express, this is a CSX operated. It provides that intermodal discharge on dock rail service, and imports 5 days to Chicago, and 7 days to Seattle, and export has 4 days from Chicago and Northwest Ohio, and 6 days to Seattle. So it's just a really rapid opportunity for intermodal movements. There's no dwell times on this as well. It's the fastest ship-to-rail service on the East Coast of the United States. Next slide. So we have a little bit of discussion on the commodity movements at the Port Authority here, and import commodities by containers. The top commodities moved that are through the ports: furniture and home furnishings, 21%, 14% of automotive and auto parts, 13% for machinery, and you see consumer goods and apparel tied at 12. So you can see it's a real good mix of products coming through into the port through intermodal. And then on the export side, you can see a large portion of export by containers is wood pulp products, and then apparel and textiles, and again chemical and plastics. So the overall TEUs imported is about 100, and this was in the fiscal year 2021. Overall is 150,374 imported TEUs, and a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, so it's the way they count containers by units. And then export TEUs was around 145,000, and the overall total close to 300,000. For reference purposes, in the 1st of November 2019, the terminal throughput cargo tonnage provided customers was about 395 TEUs. So this is respectively about 627,000 tons. So go on to the next slide, please. So to look at it from a break bulk commodities perspective, the import break bulk and bulk commodities in metric tons, about 29% is chemicals and fertilizers, gravel at 20%, wood is about 10%, and metals and ores at 18%. And you see the import tons at about close to 3.5 million import tons. And export tons is about 228,000 export tons, and you see again the wood pulp at 30%, chemicals and plastics at 41%, and then 21% is gravel and stone and asphalt. So, you know, again, we see kind of the similar numbers. So, so that takes us to our survey question for ports. Robin, you want to go ahead?
Yes, similar to the other questions, what are the needs and challenges related to port that are most important to you? Port waterway related projects, port roadway or highway connectors, port railroad related connections or projects, funding and grant programs, cargo distribution, freight related technologies, or other. So if we could get some responses here, and we are getting close to the end, so you guys are doing great, so keep with us and respond to the question, and we'll be wrapping up shortly.
And just for a quick clarification, I meant to say St. Louis, not Seattle. I had coffee on my mind. Apologize. On the 7 days for the Wilmington Midwest Express.
And I think what we're seeing in terms of ports needs and challenges are port roadway and highway connectors with 50%, and railroad related connections to projects, and cargo distribution are right for the top 3. And just refreshing to see if we got any, so what else is coming up? Cargo distribution, so those, so thank you for responding to those, and we'll keep going.
So just for time, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask Nastasha if there was any questions in the chat we should be aware of before we move forward.
No, we don't have anything in the chat.
Okay.
All right, so just for time purposes, and we do want to get input about hazardous materials and the pipeline mode within North Carolina, and so this section will talk briefly about the pipelines and hazardous material movements throughout the state. You can see a map here of the natural gas and major product pipelines that North Carolina currently has, and we compared this to the 2017, and not a whole lot has changed. There's not a whole lot of new major pipelines, and you can see in the yellow diamonds are the product terminals that we've identified, you know, and then you can see in green is the major natural gas pipelines throughout the state, and then the blue shows the highway network underneath there, so you can kind of see where the pipelines are adjacent to the freight network. And then in the dark blue there's some real short empty liquid or natural or gas lines, and then in orange there's one real big one there going up through to Raleigh. That's liquid petroleum, and that you know, from this level is pretty much the majority of it. There's other product lines that are kind of in that light purple color, and you see some coming like out of the Wilmington port area, and then in the middle of the state going back and forth. So that's we're just basically showing the map as we know it, and doing some additional analysis with special data sources related to this.
And so this is the last question, and it's related to pipeline and cargo needs or challenges. What are most important to you? Permitting processes, regulatory, funding programs, state government support, federal government support, or other related to pipeline cargo needs? And so from the responses so far, regulatory is about 41%, with funding programs and permitting processes at 18 and 12%. Safety is an important concern that noted as another item. So those are good responses. So I think that's about it, and we can, so in pipeline security, definitely good response. So we will move back to the presentation. Thank you all for your responses. That is your concludes your requirement for input in terms of the presentation. We have a few more slides that we will walk through here, but thank you for all your input there, and we will be sending out another survey after these meetings. It'll be different than this, and we'll have different types of questions. So despite your input here, we'd like additional feedback on some other freight issues and concerns. So we appreciate your time and attention in terms of the survey questions. So we will go on to the military.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you can go to the next slide, Robin, please. I think, as everybody knows who are in North Carolina, the military accounts for the second largest component of the global state product at about $66 billion. These are the primary bases that are located across the state. In addition to that, there's about 100 other military facilities, primarily for the Guard and for the reserves. We'll quickly run through some of the major bases. Of course, Fort Bragg, which is identified as number one. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, U.S. military bases anywhere. It's a host for numerous headquarters companies. Of course, the 82nd Airborne is there. From a freight perspective, it has one of the largest military freight handling facilities in the nation. Another major base, of course, which is identified as number 4, is Camp Lejeune down at the coast. It's the largest Marine Corps base on the East Coast. Numerous companies, detachments are based there, including the 2nd MEF, Marine Expeditionary Force. A lot of truck traffic, a lot of movements to and from Morehead City, where most of the Marines are deployed, as well as their equipment. So using of NC-24 from Jacksonville over to Morehead City is a major route. There's some deployments that also go out of Wilmington, but primarily the Marines use Morehead City and the Army uses the port of Wilmington. Seymour Johnson, number 7, a very large air base. It, from a rail and from a freight perspective, uses rail and truck for the movement of fuels, primarily coming out of the Selma base that Jimmy showed as one of the chevrons on the pipeline map. And then, of course, there's a lot of truck traffic moving freight in and out of that base. Number 10, well, number 10 is the Dare County Range, but north of there, Elizabeth City, of course, is the largest Coast Guard station in the world. It's a significant generator of freight, primarily truck for parts. It's a major repair depot for the U.S. Coast Guard service. Those are sort of the main locations. There's some other ancillary operations. Sunny Point is unique. It's a rail primarily only served location. It is the largest embarkation port in the U.S. arsenal for munitions. But again, that all of the traffic in and out of that facility is primarily for or facilitated by rail. If you can, there's also another interesting fact, just before I hand it back to John. There's about 18,000 rotations out of all of the military bases. That's primarily concentrated into a 3 to 4 month period, primarily late April through August. And that alone generates 18,000 additional truck moves, highly focused in on the military bases, the active duty military. There's about 134,000 active duty at all of the bases combined, and of that, little over 10% of those people are rotated out every year. So I'll hand it back to John.
All right, thank you, Charles. Now we're going to talk about the next steps in the process. We go to the next slide. So here's our schedule by month. We got started back in November of 2021. You see, we looked at the freight network. We've had some stakeholder meetings. There's what's called the Statewide Freight Advisory Committee meeting, and they meet usually bi-monthly, but we have 3 meetings with them. We talk about the progress and we get input from them. We've started the update of the truck parking study, and we're working on the analysis results and reviewing the strategies and goals to get where the plan needs to be. As you see, the entire plan needs to be adopted in November of 2022. This means to have adequate public comment time and review time. We will have a draft in mid-July. Then it will be available for anyone to comment on. Our next big effort is just the strategies and prioritization and implementation plan. So we will be presenting those to the Freight Advisory Committee meeting next month and have the draft in mid-July. If you go to the next slide. So this is where we're going to talk about if there are any other questions or comments that people have. So Robin, do they need to enter it into the chat box if they have comments or questions? Is that correct?
That would be good, yes.
Okay.
So while we're ask about anything related to the study, there was one question that came up when they entered it into the survey portion related to drones and how drone technology would be utilized, particularly in the air cargo section. How will the advancements in technology, use of drones, be addressed in the plan? I didn't know if Kip or Tiana could speak to that at all, or just to kind of give an overview of that.
One thing I can say is, without a doubt, we're seeing new technologies of drones moving freight. So definitely we'll be talking about that as a growing market area, and talking about, what are the infrastructure needs from a public standpoint to help serve drone freight delivery. So that's a great point that was brought up, and will be discussed in the freight plan.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to that, where it's not, we're looking at different emerging technology as well, looking at automated connected vehicles for trucks, drones, and other technologies to help. What we've shown you today is more of just the current and projected trends, but the implementation plans and strategies will address issues such as that.
All right, so are we seeing any other questions in the comments in the chat, Nastasha? Anyone? Any questions in the chat?
Yes, there is one in the chat. So there's one that says, will the plan address climate change and its impacts to freight?
Yes, so one of the issues now required by statewide plans is that we're going to look at things such as how do these plans affect emissions, wildlife crossings, and other areas like related to that, also resiliency. These will address how those are impacted by freight.
As well as transportation equity. Yeah, these are all part of the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and so we'll be developing white papers on these issues that'll be incorporated into the freight plan this time also. We're just not there yet.
We don't have any other questions that have come through the chat besides that.
Okay, well, if you go to the next slide, if you do have questions or comments, you think about them, you can email Heather Hildebrandt or myself. You see our email addresses there, as well as there is a link to the NCDOT webpage where all this information will be housed. Robin, remind me again how, I know this is being recorded. Will this be posted for them to see the links to the webpage?
Yes, they'll be posted. We'll be posting the slides and the recordings to the website after both of the meetings this week. So probably Friday or early next week, the information will be recorded and it'll be available. You can go to the NCDOT website and search, multimodal state freight plan, and you'll find it. But that's the true link there. But you'll be able to click on it through the PDF of the presentation. And again, we mentioned that there would be a follow-on survey to this that will have some different questions than what you responded to. So when you see that come through your email, please take a moment to take that survey and share it with your friends and colleagues and others that are interested in freight or work in the freight area and could have some good input on that. It'll really help inform the plan. So we appreciate your time and your attention today. It was great to have you all here, and I will see if there's any additional comments in the chat while we have been chatting here.
There's nothing else in the chat. We can go ahead and close out the meeting.
All right, Nastasha or Heather, do you have any last minute comments?
This is Heather Hildebrandt. Again, I just want to thank you for all of your time, and just to reiterate what John said, if you have any additional comments, especially once you get the slides where you can look at the maps a little more carefully, if you have any additions to the freight corridors or any things that are missing from that we need to address, if you've got any additional truck parking information, certainly if it's related to the freight plan development, feel free to reach out to myself or John, and we will, consider those comments at any time. And with that, I thank you all for your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a good evening.